5 minutes to 7. What do you have? 4 minutes to 7. Well, somebody told me
Jack, you think that, I mean, Michael, you think now? What time do you have?
I do. Like 7.
okay, I have like 3 minutes.
I'll wait a little bit.
I think he's going to win over there. I just asked Shaq if he had a number to call. He said he would go out. He has a number for somebody. One of their people.
Oh, my husband made it.
Shoot some lights are on.
No.
We're starting as soon as the 10 minutes are on.
Testing, testing. I don't know if the mics are on. Can anybody hear me and tell me if the mic is on? Thank you. Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. As you are making your way to your seats, I just want to apologize that we are not starting right on time. If you look at the stage, you can see that we're missing 2 candidates. So we know that they are on a very busy schedule, all of these candidates, so we are going to give them a little more time to show up. And if not, we'll just have the Judge Bagneris show. Thank you. Is that okay?
That was beautiful.
Okay.
Good job.
My husband is giving out a Treme Festival brochures.
Michael, I've always pronounced your name Plantier. What is it?
Duplantier.
Plantier.
Plantier, okay.
A little more.
Plantier.
A little more French man.
Yes, sir.
Let's see if my husband wants some more.
One of the things we should have done would be to get insider phone numbers for each one of the candidates.
Somebody probably has that.
Yeah, I thought Jack had it actually.
But I wonder how much, where the hell is Justin?
But that's a good question too. Here he is. Here's Justin.
Oh, there he is.
All right, that's a good sign, huh? So now we got to get LaToya here, huh? Wow, it's pretty full, huh?
They're here.
Oh, okay.
It's a great turnout. It's on, but you have, yeah.
So we got to make sure tell them that these are on.
We'll be starting momentarily. The other 2 candidates are getting seated right now.
Justin, I don't think that one's working.
You know, ask them about turning out here.
We'll be starting momentarily. I don't think it's on. They're not on. think we're ready.
We've done our job.
Good turnout.
You know what, Justin, I wonder if it would be a nice idea to ask people to move toward the middle if there are empty seats.
Yeah, I'll mention it. I'll mention it. There are a few seats in the middle over here. There's some seats over here on your right, particularly up in that corner in this midsection. If those of you who are standing would like a seat, we also have probably a good 15 seats over here right on this side as well. If you would please move down, we'll get started here in a minute. I wish my students got that quiet when I started talking. That was great. Are we ready? We're ready. Feel ready? Let's go. We're starting? Okay. Okay, as you're coming in, I would like to get started. We're getting off 6 minutes late by New Orleans standards. That's pretty well on time. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Justin Nystrom. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of New Orleans here at Loyola. We're excited to host this event tonight. Our motto for the center is asking crucial questions of a vital city, and we believe that tonight's event will do just that. You should have received a card on your way in listing the participants in tonight's forum, and on the back of it you will see 2 additional programs that the center is sponsoring, and we encourage you to learn more about them at ccc.loino.edu. One of them is a program on water, co-sponsored by Environment Program, and a second one is on crime in the Crescent City, co-sponsored by our Department of Criminal Justice. We're very much excited to have those. It is the center's mission to make Loyola the place where experts gather to discuss the issues that matter most to New Orleans. Tonight's forum, Shaping a Livable Historic City, the Challenges of Calling New Orleans Home, has been a cooperative effort between the hosts of the Center of the Study of New Orleans and the Institute of Politics, and is sponsored by the Preservation Resource Center and the Louisiana Landmark Society. We are encouraged in this endeavor by friends at the Committee for a Better New Orleans, Parks for All, and Smart Growth for Louisiana. Our forum is unique in a couple of regards. Unlike forums that have been happening recently, we have made the conscious decision to limit the crowded field to the top 3 most viable candidates in the race. This allows us to delve more deeply into questions of consequence. Our topic is also unique, focusing on important quality of life issues that affect all New Orleanians. These include housing costs and density, short-term rentals and the impact of tourism on neighborhoods, enforcement of the master plan and zoning law, preservations and its economic effect, infrastructure, commercial development, and transportation. One announcement, if you're here from the media or if you are just an interested citizen in doing so and going to live tweet, we would like to use the hashtag Loino Mayor Forum for your efforts. This event would also not have been possible without some key people, including Aaron Holmes and Jack Davis at Preservation Resource Center, Sandra Stokes at Louisiana Landmark Society, Tommy Screen of the Institute of Politics, Jay Crudy, Patricia Mirette, and Clinton Keene here at Loyola University New Orleans. And I'd like to extend a special thanks to all of you. Tonight's moderator is Dr. Carol Allen, who has served as the chair of the board of the Vacant Property Owners, Residents, and Associates for 4 years, and on the board of Louisiana Landmark Society for 2 years. She currently chairs the board of the International High School of New Orleans. Our first panelist is Nigel Bynum, who is a past president of the Preservation Resource Center, the founding president of the historic Faubourg Treme Association, co-chair of the Treme Fall Festival, and a board member of the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation. A true preservationist and lover of New Orleans architecture, she and her husband have renovated over 30 historic shotgun houses. Our other panelist is Michael Duplanche. Mr. Michael Duplanche has been engaged as a volunteer in a broad range of preservation and community work for more than 45 years and presently serves as first vice president of Louisiana Landmark Society. I now turn the podium over to Carol Allen, who will introduce the candidates and outline the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you, candidates, for being here tonight. We know that you're on a pretty rushed treadmill, and we really appreciate your time to be with us. Judge Bagneris, Council Member Cantrell, and Judge Charbonnet. We also want to thank you, the residents of the city, for taking up your time to be here tonight. After all, you will become a better informed voter, and you are the deciders of the city, of the leadership that moves our city forward, so thank you. I'm going to go over the rules for the night, and then I will allow each of our candidates to give a 1-minute intro. We're going to be pretty strict because we want to get as much in as we can in the time that we have you and them together. And look, if you haven't looked around, this is a standing room only crowd, folks. Good for you. Okay, we're going to have 3 forms of questions tonight. There will be questions that have been prepared in advance by the sponsoring organizations. These will be asked by our 2 panelists, Dr. Nigel Bynum and Mr. Michael Duplantier. He just taught me how to say his name. Then we will have rapid-fire questions, also prepared by the sponsoring organizations and also asked by the panelists. Following that, we will have audience questions. We hope we can get at least 3 or 4 in. We'll do what we can. The key for all of this is being succinct. For each of the prepared questions, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond. Candidates, when 15 seconds remains in your time, there are some people in this front row who are going to hold up 15 seconds. You'll get a yellow palette. And then when it's 2 minutes, you get the red palette. So at that time, I will ask you to wrap up your answers if you're still talking. With each candidate, with each question, we will start with a new candidate, and we will proceed in alphabetical order. For instance, Judge Bagneris, you will begin the responses to question 1, followed by Councilmember Cantrell, and then Judge Charbonnet. For the second question, Councilmember Cantrell, you will begin the answers, you'll lead off, and then et cetera. Is that clear to everybody? This isn't your first rodeo. We know you know how this goes. Okay. We will follow the same structure for the rapid-fire questions, but this time each candidate will have only 10 seconds to respond. And we're going to hold you to the line. The red paddle will fly up at the end of 10 seconds. The panelists and I will do our best to insist upon specificity in your answers. Our voters want answers, not stories. And for the audience questions, members of the audience, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Please be succinct in your questions. Just as we want specificity from our candidates, we want specificity from you. Our objective is to provide the greatest amount of information in 1.5 hours as we can. Any questions, anybody from on the stage? We're all set? Okay, now we'll have a 1-minute intro from each of our candidates, starting with you, Judge Bagneris.
First of all, thank you, Preservation Resource Center, and thank all of you for being here. My name is Michael Bagneris. My number is number 33, and I want to serve you as your next mayor. I would like to have the opportunity to create a safe city, a city that is livable and well-run. I believe that my background, education, and experience demonstrates that I'm up to that task. I had a humble beginning. I was born in Charity Hospital. I was raised in the Desire Housing Project. My mother was a domestic. My father was a janitor, although you like to be called a custodian. Both my parents instilled in me that honest, hard work is the way that you achieve. I worked hard in school, earned a scholarship to St. Augustine, won that school's most coveted award, the Purple Knight Award, and I did the same thing when I went to Yale University, worked hard, was a double major, and graduated from Tulane Law School. I am the only candidate that has executive experience, legislative experience, and judicial experience. I'd like to use that knowledge to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Bagneris. That was excellent. That was 1 minute. I watched that paddle go up. All right, Councilmember Cantrell, let's see you do the same thing.
Uh-oh, it's hard on that. Good evening. Thank you so much for having this forum. I have to say the participation tonight is just extraordinary. My name is LaToya Cantrell. I'm number 36 on the ballot. My soul found its home in New Orleans over 30 years ago as a student at Xavier University. I finished Xavier working through the hospitality industry and, of course, student loans that propelled me to not only go to college but also to finish. I worked in education after college, and was leading the local education fund called the Greater New Orleans Education Foundation. Prior to and after that, really, became a president of my neighborhood organization in terms of the Broadmoor Improvement Association in the Broadmoor community. That was pre-Katrina. Post-Katrina, as president, I led the community through recovery, which led the city of New Orleans through recovery. It is a microcosm of the city of New Orleans demographically and social economically, and I want to serve you as your next mayor to move our city forward. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Judge Charbonnet.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a great crowd. I'm Desiree Charbonnet, and I want to be your next mayor. I've been serving this community for the last 20 years as an elected official, first as the recorder of mortgages, then as judge at municipal court. The majority of that time was as the chief judge there. I want to thank the sponsors tonight for being here. I also want to particularly congratulate and thank the PRC for the work that they've done over 43 years preserving the rich cultural history of our properties in this city. My family's roots date back to the 1790s, so I feel as grounded in soil as the properties that we are here to preserve. So a priority for myself as the mayor will be to protect and preserve not only the properties and the buildings that are so culturally rich, but also the neighborhoods that we so much cherish as citizens of the city of New Orleans. I am prepared for this job. I have the executive level experience that has prepared me to take office day one and hit the ground running. I ask you for your vote. Good evening.
Thank you. Folks, if they do that well all night, we'll cover a lot of ground. Okay, let's begin. Dr. Bynum, you have the first question, and Judge Bagneris, you will be the first respondent, followed by Councilmember Cantrell, and then Judge Charbonnet.
Testing, is it on?
It is.
In the back, are they on?
Hello?
It's on.
Okay. Good evening. My subject is on short-term rentals. Judge Bagneris, many are concerned that the rapid expansion of short-term rentals is displacing residents, altering the fabric of our community, and driving housing prices up. Following a lengthy city council and public debate, our new short-term rental ordinances have been in effect for 6 months now. What is your opinion on the results of these ordinances at this time, and what, if anything, you would do to improve them?
First of all, the short-term rentals are, in fact, driving the prices of long-term rentals up. What we have to do is realize that a balance must exist. When I say a balance, homeowners or property owners are of the opinion that they can do anything they want with their property. Ordinarily, that would be true, except when your property adversely impacts others, or in this case, society. The short-term rentals adversely impacts the community because it does drive the property rate of the long-term rentals up because of the scarcity. Where I was originally born in the Treme area, you can't get a long-term rental there anymore. So what I would do was I would let the community have a stronger voice in what we do with short-term rentals. By that I mean the community should decide whether it wants to tie the short-term rentals into, say, homestead exemptions, whether or not it wants to have a flat number in terms of the number of short-term rentals you could have, whether they're going to do it on a density situation in terms of percentages, but let the community have a stronger voice, because the communities, particularly around, let's say, the French Quarter area, is where short-term rentals are actually expanding. But take communities that may be further away, you may have those communities, let's say New Orleans East, may want to have more short-term rentals in their areas. So it's a situation where I think short-term rentals ought to be, or the community ought to have a stronger voice in short-term rentals. And the rules that we do have, we should monitor and enforce them strictly.
Okay. Do you think that we should have them at commercial level rates versus lower rates as they are now? As far as the short-term rentals, do you think they should be at commercial rates?
The assessment as residential property, or should short-term rentals become commercial property for assessment of tax purposes?
I believe if it's not a homeowner, it should be commercial rates. If it's a homeowner, it should be property.
Okay, I think we're going to move over to Councilmember Cantrell, if that's okay with you, Dr. Bynum?
Yes.
Okay. In regards to short-term rentals, I think this was one of the most contentious issues that we faced as a city. Balance is definitely important, but when we have a city that waits pretty much until the 11th hour to stimulate or activate incentives to help create the balance in communities, we have a problem. If it was just about legislation, we really can't legislate our way out of it. We ended up having people rent their properties, and the short-term rental legislation moved forward with ensuring that property taxes were being paid, just like in terms of hospitality taxes are being paid. Of course, it has created imbalance in communities and in neighborhoods, but again, not being intentional about the incentives to levelize, to one, educate people to stay in their homes, giving them the access to gap financing. In addition to that, ensuring that enforcement has to happen, and that was the biggest issue. The city of New Orleans has not been effective with enforcement. The jury is still out. We've been in it since April. I do believe that we need to give it some time to determine what changes need to be made. We have 90 days. There was a big push for 120 days. So there was a bit of a compromise as it relates to it. But in terms of stabilizing communities, we really have to look towards not just enforcement, but also incentives to help create balance, keeping people in their homes, ensuring that homestead exemptions are in place as well. I moved forward with that legislation. Unfortunately, it did not pass. But again, it's how we incentivize creating the balance that is needed in neighborhoods. Affordability, we had an affordability issue prior to short-term rentals. But of course, again, with short-term rentals, it really will cause us to double down on how we provide education and incentives to ensure that neighborhoods can stabilize. And that is the issue we have right now.
Okay, Judge Charbonnet.
Yes. The short-term rentals have had an effect on available affordable housing in many communities. And of course, what we hear consistently, or what I hear consistently, is that neighbors are concerned about strangers coming in and out on a consistent basis. I have already proposed a plan for single-family dwellings, zoned single-family residential, that would require that the individual have to make a homestead exemption if they're going to do that. That would mean that person lives here. It also, I am proposing that an individual would have to be living here for at least 5 years, or show that they are a registered voter in order to start a short-term rental. But there are some neighbors that have welcomed short-term rentals. So, some neighbors in some neighborhoods where people feel like development is just taking too long, they welcome it. And so I think we've got to listen to the voice of the neighbors to see what they want. What works in one neighborhood may not work in another neighborhood. But enforcement is a huge issue. At municipal court, there is state legislation that sets us up to have a housing court. We have yet to begin receiving housing code violations at municipal court. We're set up for that. So enforcement is huge. There are 7 people working in safety and permits right now, and there's thousands of short-term rentals on the market. I don't understand how in the world we are going to enforce the rules if we don't have enough enforcement policies or people in effect to do that. So the first thing I do as your mayor is to beef up that department so that we can really have some effective enforcement, because those who are doing the short-term rentals, they know that we cannot afford, we don't have the capability to monitor this problem. So enforcement is a huge issue for me.
Thank you, Judge Charbonnet. And now we're going to move on to the second question. Mr. Duplantier, you will ask your second question first of Councilmember Cantrell, and then we will go down the row.
Thank you, Carol. This is a question about property taxes and sharing the tax burden. Research by the Bureau of Governmental Research has indicated that almost 2/3 of properties in the city remain exempt from taxes. Now, that includes property owned by hospitals, universities, schools, and other nonprofits. In addition, private property owners have recently had their tax bills increased by as much as 30 to 50% in some neighborhoods. Meanwhile, there are still many vacant and underutilized properties that continue to blight our neighborhoods. The end result is that we have too few taxpayers sharing the property tax burden, and some people are finding it financially difficult to remain in their homes. Two questions in relation to that setup. What efforts can you make to address some or all of these inequities to help residents continue to afford to live in their homes? And secondly, how can you encourage redevelopment of some of these underutilized properties to enable these properties to return to the tax rolls and to help ease the housing shortage and provide more affordable housing, and finally to spread the tax burden as well?
Sure.
I can repeat any of that if you like.
I tried to get some of it down. So first, in regards to sharing the burden, I have recently really went public as it relates to August 5th. You know, we experienced not only the flooding, but our eyes kind of wide open with the current and existing conditions regarding infrastructure in our city. And currently, only those who pay property taxes, not those who are exempt, but those who are paying property taxes, pay into drainage. And so we're going to have to do things differently in our city in order to ensure that we have the infrastructure improvements that are needed. And in my opinion, that calls for everyone having to put some skin in the game. Now, we have to come up with a sliding fee scale as it relates to nonprofit communities. That could be our schools, our churches, and organizations. But the point is, yes, everyone has to pay in it, because currently, again, the burden is only on those who are paying into property taxes. And that is just simply not fair given the infrastructure improvements that we need. In regards to blighted properties and bringing them back into commerce, I would, I've made a lot of strides with blight eradication and bringing properties back into commerce, but I would scale up the Green and Clean program that I started in the city and in my district. I would ensure that rules are promulgated to fully implement the Mow to Own program, the legislation that I got passed as well. I would ensure that in terms of keeping people in our homes, and I found that money through a 30-year millage that we had been paying, but it was going to pay an attorney and code enforcement, so I was able to restructure that law. That's the Neighborhood Housing Investment Fund, which is flexible resources that will allow us to really incentivize helping to keep people in their homes, providing gap financing, providing soft seconds, providing down payment and closing costs. These are the types of programs and incentives we need to keep people in homes, in addition to education as well.
All right, so with regard to the everybody paying a fair share, we currently have 60% of the residents in this community, in this city, they are renters. So 40% of the people are bearing the burden of property tax. So when you have a community of renters, certainly you're not going to have those paying their fair share. So my idea is it ties into the second question, incentivizing people to own. We need to stop thinking about renters. And when we talk about affordable housing, it always goes to people and being able to pay rent somewhere. We've got to get past that. We've got to start encouraging home ownership. We've got to offer people incentives, even those that live in their properties right now who can barely afford to fix them in their historic properties. Let's give them the incentives. Let's give them the tax breaks that they need so that they can encourage, that it encourages not only just improvements, but home ownership. I think we've gotten away from encouraging that, and that is what makes this community solid, home ownership. It gives people pride in themselves, and their families can take pride in that as well. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And giving them the incentives, it's huge, but I think it's been overlooked. We're not doing enough of it. If we were doing a good job of it, you wouldn't see as much blight around this town as you do. And I know I see it everywhere, so I'm fed up with the blight that I see.
Judge Bagneris?
Yes, I think well, twofold. First of all, we should always incentivize the refurbishing of our structures, of our homes, and bringing them back into commerce rather than tearing them down. And we can do that through several of the tax structures that exist. We can do that through the restoration tax abatement, where you can get your property frozen at the certain tax level that it is now. It's always evaluated on a case-by-case situation in terms of how much you enhance that property. And it's you can get it frozen for up to 10 years, depending upon what you intend to do to bring to refurbish the structure that's in question. You can take advantage of the low-income tax credits, which obviously deals more with multi-unit structures because it's generally applied to mixed housing, and you can deal with historic tax credits and new market tax credits. There are any number of tax incentives that should be utilized in order to maintain the structures and bring them back into commerce. Now, the second part, or actually the first part of the question that you asked, that's a doozy, because you're talking about having to go and change a constitutional amendment. And you're talking about state constitution, and as it relates to churches, you're talking about the federal constitution as well. Now, the problem is that when the nonprofit statutes were passed, they didn't give a specific enough definition as to what would constitute a nonprofit that would exempt you from having to pay property tax. And if if the society wants to do that, I'll take that on. I was a pretty good lawyer. We'll take that on. But keep in mind, simply that means that in universities, that means that the university is going to pass it down to your student tuition. Churches are going to pass another basket. Yeah.
Excuse me. Before we go to the next question, I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Duplantier, and ask you if these answers gave you what you were looking for.
The question, maybe it seemed to suggest, we weren't suggesting taxing churches. What we were suggesting was perhaps taxing property owned by churches that has nothing to do with religion, investment properties.
And that's what I was referring to when I said that the definition of how you were exempt from paying property taxes wasn't specific enough.
Right.
You know, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, Mike?
Yes.
Michael, I'm sorry. Okay, Dr. Bynum, question number 3 to Judge Charbonnet.
My subject is on parks and green space. What is your position on large parks such as Audubon, City Park, and Joe Brown? The idea of them building new structures or parking lots in existing open space or converting existing open space to specialized uses, such as a soccer field. Should such changes to our large parks be subject to review by the City Planning Commission and the City Council to ensure adequate public comment?
I support green spaces, and I support green spaces as much as we can possibly have them. Communities that have green spaces, it's proven to be a promotion of health and well-being. In communities where there's green spaces, immune systems are better, there's enhanced activity, and it even creates a noise pollution buffer between areas of buildings. I absolutely think that there should not be an interruption of the beauty of green spaces. I encourage it. If you go to Europe, you see green spaces everywhere. If you go to progressive cities, you'll see green spaces everywhere where it allows people to come together and relax and breathe fresh air. I support it. I would not want to see buildings or any type of parking structures there. Again, I'd have to hear the whole argument because I don't know what the need is and how much space it would take on these green spaces, but certainly I'd like to preserve them. They also have a real critical role in helping us with stormwater management as well.
I think we want to know, too, that would you be in agreement with the process going through the City Planning Commission as well as City Council before decisions are made?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay.
Definitely in favor of it going before the City Planning Commission. I believe that's absolutely necessary. And as far as parks and green space are concerned, I'm a Joni Mitchell fan. You know, don't pave the parking lot. I mean, I'm sorry. How did the line go? Pave parking lot, pave parking lot, and put up a right. Pave paradise and put up a parking lot. That's what it was. Yeah. So I agree with Joni on that. And I believe that the obviously parks and green space are necessary, particularly for a city that has to live with water. Some cities already are wise enough to have their parks double as a water garden in addition to being a park, which is necessary. Not only does it help in terms of controlling the flooding aspect or draining, but it also helps our city from subsiding. You know, so it's very, very important that we maintain all of our green space. So if I was on a city planning commission or on the council, I would always vote against paving paradise.
Thank you.
Amen.
All right.
Definitely in favor of green spaces. The only one that I was not in favor of is the one recommended for my community not to come back, but one as a green space. But I've demonstrated my commitment to preserving our urban canopy and expanding and extending green space throughout the city of New Orleans, whether that is ensuring that resources were adequate to bring back our neutral ground space or standing up when the community was totally outraged that a soccer stadium was being proposed right there at Audubon. And so and I'm glad that my opponents love green space, but when the community was crying out, the only one that was stepping up was LaToya Cantrell. But moving this city forward, I do expect to work with Parks for All, and really all of our citizens who want to expand green space and utilize it appropriately for stormwater management practices. I think that's a great idea. But also just beautifying and enhancing green space according to really the needs of the community. The public uses the space. And in a community, in a city like ours with health disparities such as great as ours, they definitely lend themselves to creating a community of well-being, and that's important.
Thank you.
Before we go to the next question, Mr. Duplantier, I want to explain that it is a complicated question, and there are 3 parts to it, and we will treat each part as a 2-minute response question. So, Mr. Duplantier,
Yeah,
you're starting.
actually, I probably should have cleared that with you, Carol. We've reduced it down.
Okay, we changed it.
We changed it, actually. It's still a complicated question, but we tried to simplify it a little bit, so bear with me if you would. It's about master planning.
Okay.
The proposed master plan amendments encourage expanded development with increased heights, density, and intensity in designated opportunity zones that have experienced greater revitalization post-Katrina. Now, these amendments seek to take advantage of existing infrastructure, transit, jobs, and amenities, but do appear to be a departure from post-Katrina development decisions that sought to spread the recovery throughout the city. Now, some have suggested that these amendments represent green dot planning light. So here's the question, the 2. Why are we directing new development to already successful recovered neighborhoods instead of encouraging growth in areas that are in need of investment, like New Orleans East, for example, the 9th Ward, and certain parts of the Earhart corridor, for example? And secondly, are you concerned that if we increase development in already recovered neighborhoods, whether it will result in historic properties, perhaps in generating oversized development in the historic properties, and overly intense development within the historic properties? Did you follow me?
Just to ask the second part of your
Yeah, basically, the new rules that the Planning Commission is adopting, and the council for that matter, suggest that we need more development, more intense development in already recovered neighborhoods, what used to be called the sliver by the river. But really are pretty silent on development on other neighborhoods that are crying out for development, like the ones I suggested, New Orleans East, Ninth Ward, and Earhart, for example. And then the question becomes, if you encourage more development in the already developed neighborhoods, is it going to over-intensify those neighborhoods and possibly result in demolition of historic properties because you're giving developers the opportunity to go higher and have more intense development? So that provides us an incentive for them to demolish existing housing. You can agree or disagree, but we'd like to hear your comments about that. And Judge, you're first.
Thanks a lot. You know, I believe one of the main attractions, if you will, that our city has, when you look at the European and Caribbean architecture that we have, that sets us apart from all the other cities, that cause us to painstakingly fight for what we have and actually attract the tourists here to appreciate what we have, to deviate from that by making it higher, by making it wider in the areas that's already recovered, developed, I think would be sinful. We ought to appreciate our city for what it is, for what everybody else appreciates it for. That's why they come here. You know, our city is authentic. Our city is unique. That's why we get over 10 million visitors a year. Now, as it relates, and the second part of your question, we need to move that development in the areas that's crying out for development. We got an area that's talking about succeeding because it feels that we treating it like a stepchild, and actually, to a large extent, we are.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to go ahead and deal with developments in those areas that's not compacted already in terms of development or hasn't reached that what we call the recovery level. And that is, and you left out one, it is New Orleans East, it is the Ninth Ward, particularly the lower Ninth Ward, and it's also parts of Algiers. You know, that also needs to be, those are the only growth areas that we have. And that's where I believe your development ought to take place.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, you speak of the citywide master plan. That's what you're talking about. And every 5 years, it opens back up for amendments. It's actually we're going through that process right now. The City Planning Commission is. And the purpose of revisiting it every 5 years so you can really measure the impact and growth throughout the city and then suggest and bring up amendments to bring stabilization and balance. In regards to development along, you said, the riverfront, first of all, we are a city that floods. And because we're a city that floods, we have to encourage density as well as redevelopment along areas that do not flood. Shame on us if we don't move more of our people to safe, high, dry ground. Now, in regards to looking now, of course, as you incentivize development, you have to, one, have development strategies, and you align your incentives with those strategies so therefore you can develop at the pace and the growth that we want. You always want to develop to the point where incentivized to where you get the area to a particular tipping point. When you focus on areas where you have asset and then you just infuse and put incentives to further develop, it will take care of itself once it gets to the tipping point. Well, now where we are in the city of New Orleans, we really do see areas that need development strategies and therefore need to have those incentives aligned. New Orleans East, as Mr. Bagneris mentioned, absolutely. Algiers, absolutely. Lower 9. But the development strategies have to come, and therefore the incentives should be matched to them. And therefore to the development community, they should be clear guidelines, clear criteria that they can see and therefore plan how they're going to invest those dollars in the city of New Orleans while taking advantage of those incentives. But it's very important that as we look to pushing and reinvesting in areas, that we do it where assets are, and so you avoid the scattershot approach, because the scattershot approach, it just doesn't work.
Okay.
I've done this work in Broad. Oh, gotcha. I see.
Gotcha, thank you.
Looking at the people.
She's on a roll.
Judge, before you start, Councilman, I think we all agree developing the high ground is important. However, after Katrina, we all know that you were the leading force for the redevelopment and the recovery of the Broadmoor neighborhood, which happens to be one of the lowest properties in the city in terms of elevation.
Lakeview is lower, but
Okay.
we're lower. We're bottom of the bowl. We are, but Lakeview is lower.
So I'm just wondering, how do you reconcile that with your comment about redeveloping the high ground?
Well, one is that you have to, you want to develop your high, dry areas. You want to, because you're a city that flood. In Broadmoor, part of the plan was flood mitigation to ensure that people rebuild and rebuild better, rebuild safer, making sure that we have the largest area of raised basement homes, giving incentives to our homeowners so they would not go ahead and rebuild the bottom, but also that incentive really allowed them to, one, create some balance in their property taxes, because most of them, when they purchase homes, that bottom part was built out, and therefore their mortgage was aligned with the use of that entire square footage of their home. So the incentives can really activate and allow people to live in areas where flood mitigation practices are there and are incentivized. And that's what happened in Broadmoor. It didn't need to become a drainage park because we were very intentional about making sure that our people could live better with water, because we are a city that floods. That's why the Rosa Keller Library collects 90,000 gallons of rainwater. It's stored, doesn't run off in the street. The Wilson School collects over 120,000 gallons of rainwater, doesn't go into the street. Bioswales. We need these things. Stormwater management practices.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes, the master plan is supposed to have the force of law. It has been written into the charter. It's a part of the city charter. So I'm not sure why we go and change the charter and not follow it. It's the law of the land. So one of the problems I have is that if we're going to change it, let's follow the rules and have it have the force of law. When we talk about development downtown, yes, development downtown, it's bustling, it's great, it's going on. I don't know that we need to continue to focus development there. Preservation is always the priority for me, but when you talk about downtown, I think the few areas that are left can easily become developed just by the areas that's around them. When we talk about the riverfront development, the Public Belt Railroad, that exchange between the port and the city is a huge opportunity for us to develop the entire riverfront area, the entire existence, uninterrupted. Now, what I do respect is height requirements. The part of the beauty of the riverfront is that we can see this body of water. So restrictions on heights is extremely important to me. I have gone to every part of this city. When you go to New Orleans East and you go to the 9th Ward, and Algiers as well, they complain about feeling left out. We have to redirect as many resources as we possibly can to those areas. Again, these people feel left out. We are doing nothing. This administration has done nothing for these individuals, and there are federal tax credits available. Oh, was that my... Oh,
No, that was an audience
you
comment.
tricked me. Did you just want me to stop at that point where you... Yeah, there are federal tax credits that would be immense, huge to those communities. They're just left alone. And again, if we were doing such a great job on redevelopment and blight, you wouldn't see so much blight and overgrown yards and lots in the 9th Ward. They just feel like they've just completely been forgotten about, and it's a daggone shame.
Now it's time, I think. Okay. We're going to go to question 5 now. Dr. Bynum, that's your question.
Yes.
And we're going to Councilmember Cantrell.
Okay. This is about transportation. If easier access to jobs is the goal here, then perhaps equal or greater consideration should be given to improving our public transit. What plans do you have for improving our transportation options for residents in underserved areas?
Sure. One of the things that we have seen very clearly with the expansion of rail in terms of our streetcars throughout the city of New Orleans, it has actually increased wait times, instead of helping people get to and from. So transportation options have to be a top priority to ensure that people have access. Rapid transit is something that I want to fully implement. Also thinking regionally and reevaluating the partnership between the RTA and Veolia, the manager of that. There are a lot of resources that we're spending on that contract. I think that needs to be taken a different approach, or just to relook at it now based on how far we've come and therefore where we need to go. And also, we have to look at the RTA dollars that we did receive from the BP oil spill that did not go towards transportation, but they went towards tourism. So the RTA dollars right now, for example, the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation is receiving millions from that. However, there's a deficit on the RTA side to expand transportation options. When we talk to our partners, for example, at Ochsner, they're saying their #1 cause for termination is because people are showing up late. And that's why they're moving forward with a transportation hub. We have to do that here in the city of New Orleans. The wait times are unacceptable, and our people who live in New Orleans East, I mean, come on, are really traveling the furthest. It has to change. And of course, dealing with the ferry, for example, what the administration put forth but did not have flyover. So being intentional about equipping our infrastructure properly so that our people really do have access that we talk about. But right now, it's almost non-existent.
Thank you.
So every progressive community that I've ever visited has excellent transportation, public transportation, that is. And they also think regionally. Right now, we have people that catch the bus that want to go to work at Ochsner, and after they get to Claiborne, they have to get off that bus, walk, and then get on the Jefferson Parish bus to get down to their jobs at Ochsner. That seems so crazy, for lack of a better word, to me. Why in the world don't we have an agreement and think regionally, again, with Jefferson Parish so that the bus can continually go down Jefferson Highway so that people can get to work on time? I rode the bus last week. The bus was late. I got on the bus with people who said, now that this bus is late, I'm going to be late for work because now I'm going to miss my connecting bus. Now, it's my understanding that we are not offering enough options in terms of giving them options in the streets. The city is not. So that's something that I'd look at as well. I'd also look at express buses, more express buses that will get people from New Orleans East, so wherever distant areas they are, if they're going downtown, and home as well, not just getting to work. People want to get home as well. What I want to do is I want to transform transportation in this city so that it's not a poor person's way of getting around. I hate the fact that that is the stigma that is attached to public transportation now. That is not how it is in progressive communities. So that is my intention with regard to transportation in this community.
Thank you.
We obviously have to do everything that we can possibly do to encourage the public to use mass transportation. It's not only good in terms of uniting the employer and the employee, but by reducing or by removing the traffic from the streets, it removes the stress of on the infrastructure. It helps alleviate traffic congestion. It helps reduce parking problems. It's just the right thing to do. And obviously, this question comes up, I think, timely, because if the information I have is correct, our contract comes up next year with the transit folks. So this is the time to deal with the issue, and I'd like to create a partnership with the city and the universities, particularly the university's urban planning department, and find out what is recommended by the urban planning department as it relates to moving people within Orleans Parish. and perhaps, as already been suggested, among the parishes. That would be a great metro cooperation component. It's also, I think, important to realize that we have technology now that could speed our transportation along. We can already synchronize our traffic lights so that the buses, the mass transit, would be able to go through a lot quicker, giving them the light to move and moving our people out so that they're not late for employment. Those are just kinds of some of the thoughts that are out there right now that we could utilize in terms of mass transit.
Okay, thank you very much, Candace. Now we're going to go to question 6. Mr. Duplantier, you will be asked, starting with Judge Charbonnet.
Yes. This is a question about tourism management. A writer once said, if you build it, a city that is, if you build it for the residents, the tourists will come. If you build it for the tourists, the residents will leave, and eventually the tourists stop coming. Encouraged by the current administration, tourism officials a few years ago developed plans to increase visitors 30%, up to 13 million visitors per year. But many historic neighborhoods and the current residents feel overburdened by this tourism growth without getting any direct benefits of the growth. How will you balance, and that's the key word, balance, the tourist economy with neighborhood livability and quality of life? And related to that, what would be your tourism management plan as mayor? Bear in mind that the city doesn't have a tourism management plan right now. The only plan that we have is written by the tourist industry itself, not by the city, although the master plan now mandates that the city have a management plan. So 2 questions. How do you balance tourism with the neighborhood livability? And what would be your plan for tourism management?
All right, so we know that a big part of the draw for New Orleans is our culture in general, but the historically preserved homes and buildings are a big draw. And you see people walking through neighborhoods uptown all the time, admiring our properties. So, managing, when you say managing tourism overall.
Yes, in general.
Well, I mean, first of all, we know it's the economic engine of this community primarily right now. So managing it would have to be, if you're talking about a balance as well, we've got to manage our balance between the Convention Visitor Centers Bureau, hospitality and tourism with neighbors. I don't know if we've ever, and I think you commented that it's just been pretty much promoted by them. We need some balance, right? We need to have the communities and the residents at the table so that we can discuss how it impacts them. But there are certain things that if you build it, they will come. We built the convention center and they come. We had 10 million visitors last year. So there is some truth to the fact that if you build it, they will come. But I think the bottom line is that, I'm happy about tourism because I'm glad that people come here and spend their money. But if the citizens are not being given an opportunity to be heard, then certainly they should. And as we go forward, we should have them as a part of the discussion so that they can, too, talk about how it impacts their lives.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to take issue with your comment in terms of balancing being the key. I believe if you have a great place to live, you'll have a great place to visit. I think that protecting the neighborhoods, protecting your city, that's the thing that will draw tourists here. When you start talking about making this a great place to live, you're talking about looking at the basic needs. We got to have public safety. We got to reduce crime. Tourists are not going to come to a city that if they're walking down the street, they could get clobbered on the head. Just this past Thursday, the guy gets beaten. The tourists are not going to come to a city where you're traveling on the interstate and 2 vehicles are shooting at each other and you got to try to duck bullets.
Sure.
Tourists are not going to do that. So if you concentrate on your city, if you make your city a great place to live with public safety, infrastructure that's working, that you don't have to swim to work, in order to get there, it's then that's going to be the thing that brings tourists. It's not a question of, in my view, it's not a question of balance. In my view, it's always a question of the residents first, tourists will follow.
Councilmember Cantrell.
Sure. Serving on the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation's board, I've been very vocal in my regards to how we're looking at and framing this 300th tricentennial for the city of New Orleans. And Naja, you know this. I've said, hey, instead of framing this as people want to come and welcome tourists in, we really need to look at how we're uplifting our people. And if we do that, then absolutely people will continue to come. But the health and well-being of our folks will be primary. Our people feel disconnected, and they do not see how the industry is impacting them positively in their daily quality of life. And I will make sure that we build real consensus in the city of New Orleans to go to the state of Louisiana to get more of our share of taxes that are generated off the backs of our people. Currently, the city of New Orleans only retains 1.5% of what is generated. Most of it comes back, but it comes back in terms of going to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation, the Superdome Commission, and then these individual boards determine how they will spend your tax dollars. That has to change. And especially now, I believe, is the proper time because we know we need infrastructure improvements in the city. And this is a real way that we can show residents that they too benefit from the industry. Now, we have to grow to survive. It is a strong industry. We need to ensure that it does grow, but we have to connect our people to the growth. Right now, who we market are cultural bears, but we do nothing to reinvest in the people that we market. That has to change. And if we do that, then people will be better connected to the industry and therefore feel a part of it and not feel second class to it. But right now we have a lot of work to do. I would call for a hospitality plan that will ensure that not only we're growing the industry, but again, we're reinvesting in the people that we market who make New Orleans truly what it is.
Okay, the next question is yours, Dr. Bynum, and you're going to start with Judge Bagneris.
Okay. My subject is vacant historic buildings. Several public properties in the city remain vacant and need to be returned to commerce, including the Municipal Auditorium, the Armstrong Park buildings, Charity Hospital, and the Two-Row Shakespeare Home in Algiers. Do you have any plans for what to do with these valuable historic building properties and buildings, and how would you do it?
Get a magic wand.
Yeah. I didn't hear you.
I have recommendations. I really didn't know, for instance, you mentioned Charity Hospital, which, by the way, I'm sure you know is a state building. I don't know why that building is not being looked at for mixed housing use, since it's right there in a medical corridor and right in the tendency for cities right is to have everything in walking distance. I think it would be a perfect kind of mixed housing with doctors and nurses and the people who have the lower salaries in terms of the laundry folks, et cetera. But I tossed that idea out, and that's what happened. It got tossed. It hadn't been looked at. I'd like to look at an idea like that. As far as the municipal auditorium goes, I don't know why we just don't restore it to its old glory. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it was a great event forum. Why not continue to use it in that regard? We had concerts there. Jazz and Heritage Foundation would give us night concerts there. Everybody, almost all the schools graduated from there. It was just a great venue for special events. But in its present condition, you're not going to get any events except, well, I'll leave that alone. So those are the ideas that I had in terms of the specific buildings that you mentioned. But overall, when you're looking at historic preservation, of buildings, we have to make sure that we follow the rules. In my view, limit the short-term rentals, encourage restoration and not demolition. And one last thing, by Almighty God, please let's not tax our air rights of the 19th century balconies of the French Quarter and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Cantrell.
In regards to the municipal auditorium, I would really take advantage of some of the offers that are nonprofit and public organizations are really much providing us with. I would create a cooperative endeavor agreement that would allow these organizations to move forward with restoration and layer that with the FEMA money that we know is tied to the municipal auditorium. With it being right there by the Lafitte Greenway and all of the improvements along there, it makes no sense to keep it sitting idle. We have been very fortunate to utilize historic tax credits, as well as the restoration tax abatement, which has moved properties forward. I think right now we really need to do and push harder for the federal historic tax credits to stay, because we have projects that are in queue right now that will not move forward if we lose that level of funding. One property, Ms. Naja, that you did not mention that is a priority for me is the African American Museum off of Governor Nichols. Understanding just last week, the FDIC said that we have until October 5th. The board has until October 5th to come up with the $1.8 million, or FDIC will take that property. So that is a priority for the city of New Orleans, in my opinion, especially when we're talking about historic preservation and the city of New Orleans about to be 300 years old, and this is in the heart of the Treme community. I think it's totally unacceptable for this to be happening, and yet we're not saying anything about it. October 5th, we need $1.8 million, or we will lose the we will lose the African American Museum.
Oh, my God.
Judge Charbonnet.
Yes, I want to make sure it's a question of, what was the first?
All right, I moved on.
After you hear the answers, you start to try to make sure.
I moved on, I'm
What was the
sorry.
question?
It's about the historic
I
building.
know it was,
Yes, I was saying,
demolition was an issue.
yeah, as far as what would be your plans to bring back Municipal Auditorium, the Armstrong Park buildings, Charity Hospital, and Two Row Shakespeare Homes. They're historic buildings that are vacant now and needing attention. What would be your plan to do to take care of these valuable properties, and how would you do it?
Okay. First of all, I think we have a problem in this community with demolition by blight. Some people are just holding on to their properties and allowing it to be in such poor condition to the point where it's falling down, it is irreparable. Again, I do not believe that the administration has been aggressive enough about these kinds of issues. We are not taking control of the situation. So a demolition by blight is not going to happen under my administration. We're going to have these blighted properties go for sales. We're not going to let them sit around crumbling before our eyes. That is not a progressive way to work. I have thought about the municipal auditorium on many occasions in terms of what it could be, and certainly I think we have a lot of special event venues in the community now. But whenever I visit City Hall, it seems like they're busting at the seams in there. So I would consider making the municipal auditorium an annex to City Hall. It has plentiful parking there. I think that would be a great way to serve this community for certain things, particularly when when citizens come there a lot for certain things, if it's safety and permits, et cetera. They'd have a lot of parking, and it would be easy access, and it's not as much trouble to park there. So that would be my intention. Charity Hospital is a gem in this community. It is a state property, but we can negotiate that property to own it for the city. And my goal, my dream would be to place City Hall in a beautifully renovated Charity Hospital and preserve that property and bring it back to the splendor that it once had, because it is a gem. And I believe in preservation. I do not believe in demolition. I want to avoid that at all costs. So I believe in preserving our properties, but that Charity Hospital could just be a beautiful example of a real recovery in this community.
Thank you,
Thank you.
candidates. And I want to commend our candidates for sticking in their timelines, and that is going to conclude our regularly prepared questions, but we're going to move now, hold on to your hats, to the rapid-fire questions, and we will follow again with Nadia, you first, and Michael, you second. And candidates, you will have 10 seconds to answer each question. There will be no yellow, am I correct?
I'll do that.
Timekeepers, there will be no yellow paddle, it will just be red? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, well, don't worry, I'll shut you down if you don't.
I'm sure you will.
Mike is going to start.
Okay, Nadia.
I'll shut myself
Mike's
down.
going to start.
This is double jeopardy here. You have
Hot seat.
10 seconds to answer this. Will you actively support and appropriate funds for the development of the citywide historic district plan, which is required under the city's master plan for the last 7 years, but never funded? We're looking for a commitment to fund the development of a plan for historic preservation for the city. Would you support that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll start. Yes.
Judge?
Yes, I would, as long as it didn't interfere with my top priority, which is public safety.
Absolutely supporting a plan. I think one is definitely needed if we're wanting to preserve and protect historic structures in the city of New Orleans.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Next, would you support or oppose a new cruise ship terminal on the Poland Avenue Wharf, or would you rather have an alternate proposal?
I think
As it always-
Judge Bagneris, how are we doing
I
this?
started.
I forgot.
Judge Bagneris, it's your turn.
Poland Avenue cruise ship wharf.
I like cruise ships.
Do you like them on Poland Avenue?
On Poland Avenue?
There's talk about building a new cruise ship terminal on Poland Avenue wharf.
Unknown. I don't know. I'd have to see the I'm not going to make a knee-jerk reaction on something. I'd have to see the pros and the cons. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Councilmember?
Poland Avenue, I would love to see a cruise ship terminal developed, but I would also like to look at the new wharfs that the city will now have under its authority with the recent cooperative endeavor agreement with the public belt and the port.
You know, the terminal would determine what the community needs. Again, I believe in listening to the citizens, but I'd really like to know about Poland Avenue is what's going on with the Naval Support Academy that has sat in disarray forever.
That's a part of it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, who's next?
Well, you guys have thrown me
Okay.
completely off. Go for it.
Would you support new rules that mandate and enforce open or green space for stormwater absorption and retention for new development?
And Councilmember, that's yours.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have gone on record supporting stormwater management practices for development.
Yes, I said it earlier, and we have to realize that we cannot continue to pump all the water out to the lake. It's not working. We've got to have other options, and I agree, yes.
Yes, we're a city that has to learn to live with water.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, a recent Times-Picayune article revealed that more than 70% of appeals from the historic district commissions, and there's 3 of them, in the past 2 years to the City Council have resulted in reversals of commission decisions. The question is this: do you think this appeal process needs to be reviewed? And would you consider a legislation to provide for a clearer and perhaps arguably less arbitrary review authority by the City Council?
Yes, it needs to be reviewed, I think, because if we have a master plan that's supposed to have the spirit of law, the intention of law, then why is it overturned 75% of the time? So something's wrong here. I don't get it.
Judge.
If you have a master plan, it's supposed to be enforced. If it's not enforced, I think you ought to remove the people who are not enforcing it.
Councilmember?
I think that a relook at the appeals process, I would be in favor of a relook. However, the New Orleans City Council has that authority, and I do not believe it should give that up. I think that we have to look at the I'm sorry, because that's a
Okay.
Okay, next
subject.
question.
Will you ensure public participation in determining the reuse of the city's newly acquired Governor Nichols and Esplanade Avenue wharfs?
It's me?
we do what?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Certainly. Trying to use another word other than yes. I'm a creative mayor, y'all.
Okay, let's take another easy one. Do you believe that the proposed replacement of the St. Claude Avenue Bridge and the expansion of the Industrial Canal Lock are necessary or advisable?
They're two separate things.
Break them
Okay, there are two separate things. I think the lock is definitely necessary. The resources are there for it, for protections that we know need to happen.
Okay, that's 10.
There were two parts?
Well, the question had to do with whether you like the idea of expanding the Industrial Canal Lock and removing the existing bridge that's been there for 100 years.
Yes.
Judge?
Yeah, that's an easy one.
You're next again.
Okay, next question.
You.
Want to go with that?
Yes.
This is going back to the master plan, our favorite topic. Do you think that the current plan amendment process, master plan amendment process, is producing an overly cumbersome document? And I think you've already answered this, but both of you have, all of you have, I think, do you favor strict adherence to and enforcement of the force of law issue under that plan?
Yes,
I think that's been answered,
yeah,
I think,
we
by all
kinda
three
said
of you.
that
So the question is, do you think the plan is getting too big and too cumbersome?
Absolutely, absolutely not. I think that this reaching a plan was the right process. You know, engaging the community, engaging the neighborhoods, and dealing with City Hall and putting it up on the internet and getting feedback. Absolutely the right process.
I agree, but I think that we could do a better job of engaging the public because the amendment process is open right now. And the level of engagement from the community, it could be better.
Okay, Judge Charbonnet?
It's a part of the charter, and when you talk about the charter, it's almost like talking about the Constitution. You know, let's make it solid so that we're not having to review it so much. But it was passed in 2010. Maybe the change needs of our community have changed, and we should review it.
Okay,
But if it keeps
okay.
changing, it's just
Sorry.
It loses its
Stop
effect.
you.
Sorry.
Okay, next
Okay.
question.
Do you support raising the height limits for new development along the river in the proposed riverfront overlay?
In certain areas of the river, absolutely.
no. I said that earlier.
No.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay, the city's publicly owned historic cemeteries have been neglected for years. Would you support increased budgetary appropriation for the operation and professional maintenance of these historic cemeteries?
I think we're, I think we're with you, Judge Charbonnet.
Okay. Yes, if we could afford it. You know, again, we have so many other issues in this community that we have to prioritize. But certainly, listen, when you talk about tourism, people come to see the cemeteries all the time. If we can afford it, I believe in preservation.
Okay, Judge?
Yes.
Yeah, the remains of our people have to be a top priority, absolutely.
Okay, next question.
The city is proposing a cultural innovation district and marketplace underneath the Claiborne overpass. This is after years of doing a study of possibly taking the I-10 down. Do you think it's a good idea for the Treme community, or are you in favor of decommissioning or even removing this expressway altogether?
And Judge Bagneris, I think that's yours.
I'd like to see what the Treme community thinks about it rather than superimpose my view on it. I'd like to see what Treme wants to do.
It would be
Okay.
nice. Thank you.
Councilmember?
Based on the community support at the New Orleans City Council for this initiative and development, I support it.
I
Judge
support it.
Charbonnet?
I know for a fact that that neighborhood was destroyed when that I-10 expressway went over Claiborne Avenue for a fact, and it's sad. So whatever we can do to make it better, we absolutely have to. Add some greenery, shade-loving plants under there, make it a more pleasant place to be.
Okay, we're at a stop. Okay, next question.
Yes, scattered site
more than
housing.
10 seconds.
Scattered site housing went away for a long time, but the new handle director has proposed reconstituting that program. If we develop scattered site housing again, do you think it should be required to be compatible with the existing buildings in those neighborhoods where it's to be developed?
And I think we're starting with you, Councilmember.
Okay, you are asking if the scatter sites should be redeveloped?
Well, I'm asking if they should be compatible. The problem with the old scattered site housing, it was completely architecturally incompatible with the neighborhoods in which it was located. They were all torn down. new housing is being proposed. I guess the question has to do with the compatibility. Would you help enforce compatibility requirements?
Sure, it depends on one, where if the scatter sites are in historic districts, then there are guidelines in regards to how you develop new construction on those sites. I would be more focused on ensuring that there's a level of affordability in communities where the markets are pretty much strong.
Yes, I think the property should be cohesive with the rest of the environment so that it is aesthetically pleasing and obviously affordable, but yes.
Ready?
If you got to have scattered sites, which I'm opposed to, then if you have to have them, then I would say obviously they have to conform to the architecture of the community. But don't do it.
Okay, we have one last rapid-fire question.
Do you believe that preservation contributes to the New Orleans economy, or do you think it gets in the way?
And Judge Charbonnet, I think we're with you this time.
Preservation is a part of economic development. I think it is absolutely a huge part of preserving or promoting economic development in this community, and I stand firmly on preserving as many of our historical buildings as we possibly can.
Okay.
Yes, it has direct impact, indirect impact, and what's referred to as inducement impact, all three.
Economic driver across the board. Preservation is a priority and has to be.
Okay. Let's give everybody a hand. I think they deserve this. And that's enough. That's enough. By my clock, it's now 8:20, so that gives us some time for audience questions. And so it's your turn, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Now we have one microphone handler, and so what we're going to ask you to do is when I recognize you, you will come and meet Carol. She will meet you as closely as she can, but to get all of our people in as fast as we can. So raise your hands up high and let me see who you are. Gentleman right here in front of me.
News broke last night that the Orleans Parish School Board has denied a not-for-profit permission to freely, at no cost to taxpayers, restore our nation's oldest World War I monument. Will you play politics with our city's historic sites?
Well, who would like to
How
take
does that work?
one
Is it for
first?
everyone, or do you direct the question
You
to an
can
individual?
each answer.
It's a great question, and the direct answer is no, you shouldn't play politics. I mean, that monument was established to honor soldiers from our area who died protecting us and what we stand for in terms of our uniqueness in our city, but more importantly, our country. Absolutely not.
I will not play politics as it relates to our monuments. I would work with the Monumental Task Force and other organizations and people to ensure that they can do, and really get engaged in preserving what they feel is necessary. But playing politics has mostly divided our community instead of bringing us together.
I would not play politics either. Listen, I think we need to find the money to preserve those types of monuments. It reflects our history. It shows how much we respect those who, sacrifice for us. And I think absolutely we've got to show that we have respect for those who fought for us. So yes, no, I wouldn't play politics. Yes, I would fund it.
There's a young man, somebody in the back. Which one of you? Okay, come on down. Come on down.
The price is right.
And I'm going to get over there next, I promise.
How you doing? I want to know, what are you guys' plans to help raise minimum wage in the city of New Orleans?
Could you repeat the question, Carol?
What are you guys' plans to help raise minimum wage in the city of New Orleans?
Will you help plan minimum
Raise
wage?
minimum
What are your
wage
plans
in
for
the city of
raising
New
the
Orleans.
minimum wage?
Yeah.
Who started last time? It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Just
The
go.
city of New Orleans can only
Bagneris,
control
sorry.
right now the minimum, the salary that is paid, or the hourly salary paid through contracts that it lets. So we have to go to the state legislature. My plan is to join with our New Orleans delegation. I have large support from those that represent the city of New Orleans in the state legislature to go forward and raise the minimum wage, absolutely. I do think it's gonna have to be incremental. To go from the 7-something to 15 would be a big jump. Remember, when you go to the legislature and when you're trying to get something passed, it's something called compromise. So you have to be able to get on the same page, so to speak, with individuals so that we can get there. But I think we can get there for sure, and I'm all for it.
Yes, I've been walking the talk in regards to raising the minimum wage, first on the New Orleans City Council, raising it to $10.11, as well as supporting legislation at the state level that we've had in place to push for an increase of the wage. I will not waver, and I will, as I've demonstrated, I am for it. I will continue to be.
Judge Bagneris?
Ditto.
Okay, let me get a question over here. Young lady, thank you. It's a pleasure to see so many young people here, by the way,
it
tonight.
is, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Hello. I'm just wondering if you have any plans to make New Orleans a sanctuary city for immigrants in response to the recent DACA repeal.
Okay, let me see. Let's start with Judge Bagneris. Did I start with you last time? No.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We are already classified as a sanctuary city. Something that the city definitely got right, in my view, was the fact that how we treat our immigrants now. We will not ask the immigration status of anyone who is a victim or anyone who is a witness in a particular event. And I support that concept. You know, so we are already there. I don't know how it can be improved upon.
I do not subscribe to the labeling of being a sanctuary city. We are a welcoming city. I put that legislation forward and got it passed by the New Orleans City Council. We're a welcoming community. And not just in terms of saying it, but real policies align with it. Whether it's economic opportunities, community policing, language access barriers, all embedded. And not only protecting our immigrant community, but also our LGBT community, a top priority. Last week, I drafted and moved forward a resolution to support DACA and standing up and resisting what is happening at the federal level. So again, I've demonstrated my track record on this. I will not waver.
Judge Charbonnet?
Yes, on August 29th, 2005, when we were inundated with water, the first people that came to this community to help us rebuild were immigrants, primarily Latinos. So I think it is disingenuous of us to now not support them after they came here and rebuild our homes. I don't know one person in this city who did not have someone that was from that was a Latino descent that came here and helped. I don't know anybody that didn't get their help. So now to say it's time for you to go, in our particular community, I think it's wrong, and I think it's disingenuous, and it's like using people. What I want to do is help people become citizens. Let's do that. Now, violent criminals, I don't have any need for that, all right? But when you're talking about people here who've been here all this time and now we're just going to kick them out, no. And I support DACA. I went online and made a full force statement in support of that.
Okay, I think we can get one more. Well, if you insist.
Hello, how you guys doing?
Hey.
My question is, what are the plans to close this economic divide between the African American household and other households in the city of New Orleans?
Judge Charbonnet, let's start with you.
All right, the median income of African American families right now in this city is $33,000. That's pitiful. We have got to offer more opportunity. You know, I was talking to a lady who was asking me about the minimum wage, and what I told her is that I want people to make more than the minimum wage. We need a strong workforce development program for our young people so that when they leave high school, if they're not going to college, they come out with a skill. We need to partner with these community colleges. We've got to do better. I want people to do better than $15 an hour. I'm tired of that discussion in a way, although I realize it needs to be brought up. Let's give people way better than that. The average African-American family cannot afford the rent in this town. The rent for a two-bedroom is almost $1,500. The Department of Housing says that you should spend 30% of your salary. They cannot even afford a two-bedroom property right now on that salary. That salary should be an $830 a month property. So we've got to do better. We've got to do better, but we've got to get those jobs, that job training so they can get good jobs, particularly when we want to bring businesses here.
Council member.
Okay. One is providing real access to capital that would help our small businesses build themselves up. Access to capital is really a real deficit in our city, and that is really our small businesses propel economic development and growth, and they also employ those who are hardest to employ in our city. Of course, education and training, workforce development has to be a priority, linking our people to it so that, again, they can be trained appropriately for jobs and industries that we know are growing in our city, whether it's digital media outcomes or platforms, stormwater management, renewable energy sources, of course, advanced manufacturing. These jobs, we know, technology, medical, they're here and they're growing, and we have to produce a workforce that can take advantage. So it starts too with education as well as training, and we have a long way to go, but that has to be a priority if we're going to address the gap, which has gotten wider in the post-Katrina environment.
Okay. Judge?
You remember what I talked about in terms of the having the VOTEC students go ahead and work on the property, and having the partnership with the business community, having them donate the property, the building materials, so that it didn't cost the city anything, and that way we'd be able to sell it to the to a homeowner, potential homeowner, for no more than 120% of the median income. That means you'd be able to buy a home, and your median and your income wouldn't have to exceed $37,000 a year. That's pretty darn good, all right? So that's one way. And then, of course, to close that gap, we're going to bring jobs here. We're going to bring lots of jobs here, primarily through the port. We are the only, we are the only port city, thank you. We are the only port city that does not put add-on value to the products that come across the docks. You know, we get lumber from South America, but we don't have a furniture manufacturer. We're the #1 importer in the country of rubber. Where's our tire manufacturer? You know, we don't manufacture anything except coffee, because we got to stay up and party. You know, and that's it.
Okay. Okay.
Well, there you go.
Time out. Okay, I have been begged to let one more question go, and I'm going to pick it from right over here in the middle of the room. Who's got a question there? Yes. Young lady? Yes.
Oh, right down center.
Get ready, folks, and I think this time it's whose turn?
Okay.
Do you remember? Do you care?
There's it.
I'll do it.
This is an economic workforce development program, too. A couple of you know probably what I'm going to be asking. I think, you know, we have to change the ownership paradigm in this city. You know, we have owners and then we have workers, and that's it. You know, and there's a big divide right there. You know, and I've been doing cooperative development for a long time, and as you all know, it goes across all industries, you know, and it impacts everything from housing to jobs, you know, and I advocate for a hire ourselves thing. Will you push that in economic development, in workforce development, as 16 other cities in the U.S. have already done?
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Ellie, absolutely, and that's why I answered that Access to capital is what you're talking about that will allow our entrepreneurs to really take advantage. And that can come in the forms of micro-lending practices, which I have studied. And over 99% in terms of those micro-lends, people pay them back. It really does give them a hand up so that they can take care of themselves. And it is a priority. We have to provide access to capital.
Judge Bagneris.
If you're going to have a city that grows, you got to have the growth of businesses to allow that growth to take place. And without the businesses, you're not going to have jobs. Businesses provide the jobs. So, and that's what the economic paradigm exists on. So to answer your question directly, absolutely, everybody at this table is going to tell you the same thing. We have to deal with the economic growth of the city, and primarily that's done through small businesses. Small businesses are still the backbone of the economic center of our country.
Yeah, I believe we have to support small businesses. We can give the incentives and the jump starts for these businesses to start. But if City Hall is not business friendly, then that thwarts all the progress. And again, I want to use technology to make City Hall more business friendly, because if you can't get your process going through City Hall, then you're stalled, so you can't get your business going. So my idea is always going back to City Hall and making it technology efficient, but certainly incentivizing the businesses with a boost to get them started, but supporting our small businesses that we already have as well.
Okay, well, I want to thank you everybody for your attendance tonight, for your patience. Thank our candidates.
Fire codes on Canal Street, you gonna let it burn down?
I beg your pardon?
Nothing about fire codes on Canal Street.
Well,
buildings burned down. This is gonna be a block before you install fire codes.
Thank you very much, and I want to wish you all good night. Thank you very much for coming.